nation, reparations and recompense for the damages that they have done.
That's Hamid Maulana, chairman of the African World Reparations and Repatriation Truth Commission. He explains why his group is demanding trillions of dollars from Europe and the Americas for enslaving Africans. Good evening, I'm Richard Cote in the Washington studios of the Voice of America Africa Service. Also tonight, the WFP says food shortages are worsening in Somalia, and Angola blocks the UN effort to address the country's humanitarian crisis. Those stories was paused with Sunny Young live from Seville, Spain. It took $800 trillion from Western Europe and the Americas. The African World Reparations and Repatriation Truth Commission made the claim on behalf of the continent at a meeting in Accra Tuesday. It says the money is to compensate Africa for the hardships it suffered during the slave trade and colonialism. Hamid Maulana is the chairman of the commission. From Accra, he spoke to me about the group.
Our group is very representative. We have an international body, not only Africans on the continent, but Africans also in the diaspora. We had 13 different African nations represented at this particular conference. So we think we are very well representative of the African world.
How do you expand on the participation of the Africans in the diaspora?
We had representatives here from an organization in the United States of America, and they are pursuing a very similar issue with us, but they are mostly looking at it from a domestic point of view.
What factors did you take into consideration in arriving at a figure of $777 trillion US that you are demanding from Western Europe and the Americas?
It's difficult to put a figure on the number of our ancestors who perished or were murdered, but we know that the figure is somewhere in terms of numbers that perished between 150 million to 200 million Africans perished in the Holocaust. And now, in addition to that, the human resource, we look at the mineral resources. There was gold and silver that was taken out each time that one of the slave ships moved. In the cargo hold, there was gold and silver and other resourceful items, minerals, that were taken with it. We have looked at the records. We've seen that Portugal, Spain, France, and many others were taking out tremendous amounts and hundreds of pounds of gold going back to the 15th century all the way up until the end of slavery. So $777 trillion is the principal. And we're talking about interest on that per annum at the going market current rate.
It will be recalled that the late Chief Moshood Abiola of Nigeria championed this idea of reparation for enslaving Africans. Are you following his line of action in terms of strategy or charting another course altogether?
We have a lot of respect for the late Moshood Abiola. What is different from our conference and his, the conference that they had, number one, was about only reparations. This we call a historic conference of ours that we just had, because this is the first time that there has been a conference on reparation and repatriation at the same time. So our conference, it differs from the late Moshood Abiola's conference on that level. Secondly, is that the late Moshood Abiola conference that they had in 1990 in Lagos, and also the Abuja conference in 1993, neither one of them, to the best of our knowledge, pursued any legal or even established a legal format on how to go after the culprits who brought about the transatlantic slave trade.
What legal format then are you going to establish or pursue?
There are institutions that address the human rights abuses, but at the same time we're looking at the International Court of Justice at The Hague. This particular court, the International Court of Justice at The Hague, it is set up specifically to deal with these type situations. So there are enough international bodies that can address this particular issue, and also the General Assembly of the Organization of African Unity. We also are bringing them aboard to look into this issue.
Your commission is demanding that the current international debt owed by Africa be unconditionally cancelled. How do you relate this to the $777 trillion US that you want from Western Europe and the Americas?
The debt, we said, is an illegal debt. It's illegal because the monies that have been loaned to Africa, these monies, as we see it in our research, are a direct spinoff from the transatlantic slave trade. So there is a linkage here of Africa's suffering today, trying to pay these debts back, and what happened to Africa yesterday. And moreover, the African nations are really struggling to pay just the the interest on these debts. They can't even afford to pay that, much less talking about the principal. So they are using at least up to about 69% of their foreign exchange earnings is trying to meet debt servicing. So what they're doing is they're knocking African countries to their knees.
How do you assure Africans and the Africans in the diaspora that your idea, that is your commission's idea of reparations for enslaving Africans while colonizing the continent, will achieve some degree of success?
We are very optimistic because we feel that nations that took part in the transatlantic slave trade do realize that there was a crime committed against humanity. But what has happened is that African nations heretofore had not come forward to demand from these nations reparations and recompense for the damages that they have done. We know that many of these nations, if not all of them, are Christian nations. And if they believe in their Lord, in Christianity, they will have to address the crimes that have been committed against African people or crimes against humanity. The record is there. The documentation is there. No one can deny this. They know that this has happened. The only thing is people have kept quiet and tried to sweep it under the carpet. But before we exit this millennium and go into the next millennium, by the grace of God Almighty, and I know you and all people listening to this program believe in God and righteousness, they cannot deny Africa this righteous demand that we are making.
Hamid Maulana is the chairman of the Africa World Reparations and Repatriation Truth Commission. He spoke with me from Accra.
Reparation and Repatriation Truth Commission has been speaking about roles played by traditional rulers in the slave trade. The group met in Accra last week and demanded about $800 trillion from Western Europe and the Americas. It says the money would compensate